Good day, dear students. I congratulate you. We have completed a large series of lecture of medical genetics. And today we start a new big theme. We will talk about parasitology. And our first lecture will be about main definition of parasitology. The main questions that we must answer today are medical value of animals, parasitism as a form of interspecific interaction, parasitism and parasites classification, life cycle of parasites, modes of invasion, and host-parasites relationship. And let's start. Our first question is medical value of animals. As you know, animals can be parasites, such as protozoa, helminths, and arthropods. The next value is the reason of the disease. The next value is vector, mechanical and biological or true vector. I remind you that the vector is a living organism that transmits an infectious agent from an infected animal to a human or another animal. Vectors are frequently arthropods such as mosquitoes, ticks, flies, fleas, and lice. Vectors can transmit infectious diseases either actively or passively, and on the base of it can be subdivided into two main groups. Biological vectors, such as mosquitoes and ticks, may carry pathogens that can multiply within their bodies and be delivered to new hosts, usually by beating. And mechanical vectors, such as flies, can pick up infectious agents on the outside of their bodies and transmit them through physical contact. The next medical value of animals is reservoirs. You may come across terms like natural reservoirs, also known as a disease reservoir or a reservoir of infection. A reservoir is the population of organism or the specific environment in which an infectious pathogen naturally lives and reproduces, or upon which the pathogen primarily depends for its survival. A reservoir is usually a living host of a certain species, such as an animal or a plant, inside of which a pathogen survives, often through not always without causing disease for the reservoir itself. By some definition, a reservoir may also be an environment external to an organism, such as a volume of contaminated air or water. The next medical value of animals is poisonous animals, like spiders or scorpions. The next, drug producers, like bees and snakes. And the last medical value of animals is animal models. We talk about animal models in our last lecture. We said that in animals is possible to reproduce various human diseases and to test drugs. This is possible on the basis of Vavilov's law. And now let's talk about the parasitism as a form of interspecific interaction. There are three main types of biological interaction, and the first is antibiosis. Antibiosis is a type of biological interaction when the population or one of them have a negative influence of each other. The impossibility of the coexistence of two organisms. Examples of antibiosis include the relationship between antibiotics and bacteria, or animals and disease-causing pathogens. The next type of biological interactions is symbiosis. Symbiosis is a type of a close and long-term biological interaction between two different biological organisms, at which both partners or only one of them have a favor. The symbiotic relationship between an animal and a clone sheep is a classic example of two organisms benefiting the other. The animal provides the clone fish with protection and shelter, while the clone fish provides the animal nutrients in the form of waste while also scaring off potential predator fish. And the last type of interspecific interaction is naturalism. Naturalism is a type of biological relationship where the two different biological organisms interact but have no effect on each other. For example, different types of antelopes in the savannas of Africa eat plants on different tiers. The giraffe antelope feeds on the leaves of trees. The wild beast feeds on the leaves or shrubs and tall grasses. And the kudu antelope feeds on low grasses. And symbiosis subdivided into two different groups. The first group of interaction is mutualism. Mutualism is a type of symbiosis when one species without the other cannot exist. A mutualistic relationship is when two organisms of different species work together, each benefiting from the relationship. One example of a mutualistic relationship is that of the oxpeckers, it is a kind of a bird, and the rhinoceros or zebra. Oxpeckers land on rhinos of zebra and eat ticks and other parasites that live on their skin. The oxpeckers get food and the bees get pest control. Also, when there is danger, the oxpeckers fly upward and scream a warning, which helps the symbiont, a name of the other partner in the relationship. And the next group of symbiosis, another type of symbiosis, is commensalism. Commensalism is a type of symbiosis when one organism lives at the expense of another without causing him harm or benefit. For example, golden jackals, once they have been expelled from a pack, will trail a tiger to feed on the remains of its kills. And commensalism subdivided into four main groups. How can you see at the slide? The first group is synoekia or simple lodging. Synoekia is a coexistence of organisms of different species, often indifferent to both cohabitants. Paroekia. Paroekia is a variety of commensalism usually develops between organisms with protective equipment and unprotected animals. Epioikia, or in another word, ectocommensalism. The tenant settles on the surface of the body of the animal host. And entoikia, the tenant penetrates inside the host. And the last group of the biological interactions is antibiosis. Antibiosis subdivided into next type. Predation. Predation is when one organism uses another as nutrition source once, killing the victim. Some examples of predator and prey are lion and zebra, bear and fish, and fox and rabbit. The next type of antibiosis is competition. Competition is the impossibility of the coexistence of species due to struggle for food sources. For example, woodpeckers and squirrels often compete for nesting rights in the same holes and spaces in trees, while the lions and cheetahs of the African savanna compete for the same antelope and gazelle prey. The next type of antibiosis is amensalism. Amensalism is one of the joint living species oppresses another, not getting neither harm nor benefit from it. For example, when cattle trample on grass, the grass is crushed. However, the cattle do not benefit from this action nor is harmed in the process. And the last group of antibiosis is parasitism. What is the parasitism? Parasitism is a type of relationship when one species uses another organism as a source of nutrition and habitat. It may be temporary or permanent. And now let's talk about parasitism classification. On the different bases, parasitism can be classification on the different group. For example, obligate parasitism, facultative and incidental parasitism. What is an obligate parasitism? Is when parasite cannot exist without a host. For example, Tenerichus saginatus. The next type of parasitism is facultative. Parasitism is when organism may either live as a parasitic form or as free living form. For example, Stranguloides stercoralis. And accidental parasitism. It's when accidental penetration of a free living organism into the body of another organism where it lives and feeds for a short time. For example, Julie de Licci can accidentally get inside the human body, for example, crawl into the ear and cause inflammation there. Another classification is based on the time when the parasites take a part on the host surfaces. Temporary parasitism. Parasites attack the host for food only. And stationary parasitism. Parasites spend on the host most of their life. And stationary parasitism can be subdivided into two main groups. Permanent. Parasites spend their whole life on or inside the host. And periodic parasitism. Parasites is parasitic form spend only part of their life cycle and the rest of the time they live outside the host. Another classification of the parasitism on the base on what type of the life cycle parasites have a parasitic form of life. For example, larval parasitism, the parasite is a larva. Imaginal parasitism, parasite is a imago. Imago, it is an adult form of the parasites. And heteroxenic, the life cycle of the parasite occurs sequentially on several hosts. And now let's talk about parasites classification. But first, let's write the definition of parasites. Parasites are living organisms which depend on a living host for their nourishment and survival. They multiply or undergo development in hosts. There are two groups of parasites. It is an ectoparasite. I'm sorry, there are error, no acroparasite but ectoparasite. Ectoparasites inhabit only the body surface of the host without penetrating the tissue. And endoparasite, a parasite which lives within the body of the host. And endoparasites subdivided into several groups, for example, intradermal, cavital, intraorgans, tissular, and intracellular. Another classification of parasites on the basis of pathogenicity. Pathogenicity is ability to cause disease. And there are three groups. It is a pathogenic, when the parasites can cause a disease. Non-pathogenic, or in another word, free living forms of the organism. And conditionally pathogenic are only pathogenic under certain conditions, such as decrease of an immune system, cooling, exacerbation of chronic diseases, or severe concomitant pathology. The example of conditionally pathogenic, it is Entamoeba gingivalis. The example of the non-pathogenic or free-living fork is Amoeba proteus. And a lot of examples of pathogenic parasites, for example, Lamblia intestinalis. Now let's talk about life cycle. What is a life cycle? Let's write the definition. A life cycle is a totality of all stages of development of parasites and its transmission from one host to another. And life cycle can be direct and indirect. Direct is when parasite requires only single host to complete its development. Indirect life cycle is when parasite requires two or more species of hosts to complete its development. On the base of life cycle, parasites classification subdivided into three main groups: geoprotists or geogelmins. It is when one part of the life cycle takes place in the external environment. There are no intermediate hosts. The next group, bioprotists or biohelminths. Parasite development takes place in a living organism. There are intermediate hosts. And contact parasites. An affected person is a source of invasion for other people. And let's write the definition of the host. Who is the host of the parasite? Host is an organism which harbors the parasite and provides nourishment and shelter to later and is relatively larger than the parasite. And host can be definitive host, the host in which adult parasite lives and undergoes sexual reproduction. Intermediate host, the host in which the larva stage of the parasite lives or asexual multiplication takes place. And reservoir, the host in which parasites accumulate, multiply for a long time, retain the ability to become affected and spread over the territory. According to number of hosts, there are three main groups of parasites. Monohostal parasites. Strictly specific, have only one host. Stenohostal parasites can affect several host species, of which one is the main and the other hosts play secondary role. And polyhostal parasites may have different type of the host. For example, the head loss parasites only on humans, For example, Pediculus humanus. Fleas, for example, Pulex irritans fleas parasitize mainly on animals, but they can also attack humans. And Toxoplasma gondii can parasitize on different types of hosts, for example, clams, dogs, and guinea pigs. And now let's talk about modes of invasion. The first type of invasion is skin transmission. Skin transmission can be active and passive. Active is when parasite enters to the host organism through intact skin, and passive skin transmission is when parasite enters to the host organism through damaged skin, for example through wounds, scratch, and bumps. The next type of invasion is vector transmission. Parasite enters to the host organism by insect. When it by insect bite, this type of vector transmission is called inoculation. And when it by insect excrements, this type of vector transmission is called contamination. A vector could be a biological vector or a mechanical vector. We talked about it in the at the beginning of our lecture. The next modus of invasion is oral transmission. Is through oral route by contaminated food, water, soiled fingers, or vomitus. Nutritive. Parasites enters to the host with specific food, which contains different stage of parasite development. For example, Diphyllobotrium latum by fish, Sarcocystis sui hominis by pork, and Sarcocystis bovi hominis by beef. Hydrous. Parasites enter to the host with contaminated water. Intranasal. Intranasal can be airborne and airborne dust. Sexual modus of invasion, vertical transmission from mother to fetus, and auto-invasion. And our last question is parasite-host relationship. How can you see on the slide? There are different types of the parasite-host relationship. For example, the effects of the parasite on the host are mechanical impact, toxic impact, host nutrient intake. And the effect of the host on the parasite, it is humoral reactions, tissue reactions, cell reactions, and immune response. Parasite effects on a host. Mechanical, hooks, botria, suckers. It is a different type of fixations organs. Toxic by vital products. Metabolic disturbance, immunotropic, carcinogenic, and behavioral. Parasites for fixation on the host use various fixation organs that can exert a mechanical effect on the host tissue. For example, suckers, hooks, and also it can be physical obstruction by the numerous number of helminths in the intestinum. And prolonged mechanical stress leads to the development of the tumor, and it is called chondrogenic effect. We said that the toxic effects through the waste products of the parasites. Also metabolic disturbance, also it's called food taking effect, when parasite eats the nutrition of the host and the sick people lose the weight, have a cachexia. allergic manifestation or immune response. On the slide you see a kissing bug or Triatoma persistens. It is a carrier of trypanosomes, for example, Trypanosoma cruzi to be exact. The bug is called a kissing bug because it bites a person on the lip. In the place where the skin is thinnest. As a result, a powerful allergic reaction can develop, which manifests itself in the form of powerful, painless swelling of the one half of the face. The symptoms is called Raman's symptom or Raman's sign. And the last, very interesting host behavior change. For example, fever in malaria leads to loss of consciousness. Mosquitoes bite the sick people more often. Larvae of Fasciola hepatica parasiting in mollusk extend their lifespan. Toxoplasma gondii changes the behavior of host, making him fearless. Therefore, mice infected with Toxoplasma cease to be afraid of cats and are overeating. And the syphilis bacteria activate the sexual behavior of the patient. And another different examples of host behavioral changes. And at this interesting moment we finish our lecture and meet in a week and talk about the protozoa. Have a good day.